Great. Okay, I'm Professor Green, and today we're going to be talking about part 2 of chapter 2, and we'll be talking about economic systems. Let me go ahead and share my screen. Before I start on the slides, I actually wanted to show you this website, Freedom in the World. I think one of the slides on the previous deck was deleted, and so by the publisher. And so I just wanted to make sure that you were aware that this website exists out there, and I think it's really interesting. It's the Freedom in the World is the widely read and cited report of its kind, tracking global trends in political rights and civil liberties for almost 50 years. So it tracks and the conditions of political rights and civil liberties around the world, et cetera, and it might be a very useful website to use when you do your projects. So again, it's freedomhouse.org/report freedom world. And so let's go ahead and jump in here to the slides, talking about economic systems. So we said here that the political ideology and economic systems are connected. There are three major types of economic systems: the market economy, the command economy, and the mixed economy. And so we'll go through them right here. The market economy system is like in countries where individualism are given primacy over collective goals. And then the state-owned enterprises are common in countries where collective goals are dominant. And then the third one is the mixed. And so now when you think about mixed, right, hopefully China is coming to your mind because we've mentioned that a few times already. Let's first talk about the traditional market economy. This one is where goods and services country produces and the quantity in which are produced determined only by supply and demand, right? The supply not be restricted by monopolies. The government encourages free and fair competition between private producers, and there's a constant incentive to improve products and processes. And this is all left up to the natural flow of the markets. As nothing is planned by anyone, how much to supply, how much to grow, how much to produce, etc. The supply is not restricted. And in the United States and as well as in Europe, how we try and prevent against the monopolies is that we have all these antitrust laws set up, right? And so you'll see very often when a organization wants to merge or acquire another organization, they very often, if it's a large enough organization, they have to testify in front of the Senate to make sure that they are not going to come up with a monopoly at the end of their merger or their acquisition, that there are antitrust laws that are created to make sure that that doesn't happen. And another main premise here of the market economy is that what I like to reiterate is that entrepreneurs have the right to all profits, right? And so they are incentivized to make more money because that'll go into their pockets, and they can grow the company as they see fit. The opposite is here the command economy. And this is where, France has tried these ideas, India, but unfortunately, a lot of these have fallen into disfavor, right? The goods and services a country produces, the quantity in which they are produced, and the price at which they're sold are planned by the government. All businesses are state-owned and have little incentive to control their costs and be efficient. And because there's no private ownership, there is little incentive to better serve consumer needs, and dynamicism and innovation are typically absent. There's a photo here of North Korea in their command economy, saying that, when Kim Jong-un visited a factory, right, that there is not necessarily a lot of incentive for those workers to go above and beyond their job description, right? Because the costs are controls and there's little incentive to be efficient, unfortunately. There's also something called a mixed economy, as I mentioned, right? China falls into this area, and until recently, maybe Russia or even Venezuela it can be in this area as well. They include some elements of market economies and elements of command economies. The governments take over troubled firms considered vital to national interests. But as you can see, these economies are becoming less and less common, right? The preference, right, is obviously moving with a market economy rather than a command or even a mixed. But we do see times when this mixed economy shows up, even in places like America. If you remember in 2008, when we had a financial crisis, the United States bailed out a handful of different companies like AIG, Citigroup, General Motors. But the idea was that very quickly they sold those shares back to the public. So they felt that these organizations were so big, and if they failed, then it would cause the whole financial system and the whole all financial markets to crash and have an issue. So the government stepped in and took ownership of those companies for a short period of time. But within a couple of years, 2, 3, 6 years, those shares were then sold back to the public. But where we see this in China is that, right, obviously companies are owned purely by the government when it comes to telecom or transportation. But we also see where the government heavily subsidizes private organizations, right? With Huawei, right, for example, the telecom company, they gave these amazing low interest rates so that the organization, and then they push those interest rates onto the private consumers can produce and can buy these products. And so it really puts, as I said in the previous section, puts other private organizations like Cisco at a disadvantage. But it's because China, right, really wants to move their own companies forward. So this is the end of part 2. I will take a break here, and then we will come back and talk about legal systems in our third video of chapter 2.